Hello runners, my name is Coach Brian Hand with Denver Running Coach, and welcome to this instructional video on 5 things that you can do at work to make you a better runner. I'm seated in this chair because many runners have jobs in which they spend a significant portion of their day seated at their desk. And research has shown that being seated hour after hour, day after day can be detrimental to our health. And it can also be detrimental to our running. So I wanted to share with you 5 tips, 5 things that you can do to counteract those negative effects of sitting day after day, hour after hour, day after day, if you have a desk job. Now, even if you don't have a desk job and you're able to walk around during the day, the tips included in this video, most of the tips can also be beneficial to you, so I recommend incorporating them in your day as well. Now, the key to using these tips effectively is to be intentional, to incorporate them on a consistent basis. So my recommendation to you might be to set a timer that goes off every hour, where you take at least a 5-minute break and incorporate at least 1 to 2 of these tips each hour, or as frequently as you can throughout the day, and then just keep doing this day after day. Now, the first tip that I'm going to talk about is very simple, and that is just to get up out of from your desk and just walk around for at least 2 to 5 minutes. And while you're doing that, grab some water, get hydrated. So when we sit at our desk hour after hour, day after day, what's happening is the hip flexors in the front of the upper leg are constantly being contracted. And those muscles, over time, they're going to become shortened. When they become shortened, our hip flexors become tight, and that minimizes our hip extension. Now, that's important because when we run, we want to have good extension in hips. That helps us to propel us forward. We have good symmetry as far as our leg swing when we're swinging our leg forward and when we're swinging our leg back. But if we minimize that hip extension by having tight hip flexors, what happens is oftentimes we compensate, and we compensate for having limited hip extension by arching our back. And so when we do that, we're putting a lot of additional stress and strain on our lower back. Also, when we have limited hip extension, we tend to use our calves more to push off. And as a result, we put a lot more stress and strain on our Achilles tendon, and that can lead to issues with the Achilles tendon. So we want to get up, give our hip flexors a break, and start walking around. Also, when we're seated for significant portions of the day, our glutes are on vacation, right? And so because of that, our glutes can become weaker. And so our glutes do they have 2 primary functions. One is that they help stabilize. They help stabilize the pelvis and the hips, which are important when we run. When we have one foot on the ground, it's important to keep that stable so that, for example, our leg is not collapsing inward, our hips, knee and ankles aren't collapsing inward, because that leads to a lot of injuries that occur in runners. Also, our glutes are very strong muscles. They may not be as big as the quadriceps, but actually our glutes, especially our gluteus maximus, when engaged, is properly engaged, is our strongest muscle that we can use when we run. So we want to get walking around, get our glutes involved, give our hip flexors a break. I mentioned hydration as well. It is important to stay hydrated. At a minimum, we should be getting half our body weight in ounces of water each day. Many of us don't do that, and as I mentioned, that's a minimum. So if you weigh 150 pounds, you should be getting at least 75 ounces of water. That is a minimum. As runners, we're exercising, we're losing fluids. We need to be consuming more, especially if you sweat profusely. So that's tip number one, is just to get up, ideally every hour, walk around for a couple minutes, get your blood circulating again. Our blood tends to pool in our lower extremities when we're seated, so get that blood moving around, get more invigorated, engage the glutes, get some water. All right, tip number two is to engage something called the transverse abdominis. The transverse abdominis, or TVA, is a deep abdominal muscle, and it's an important stabilizing muscle. So we want to get that muscle engaged. We want to try to engage it as much as possible throughout the day. Also, is very helpful to engage that muscle when we run. Most of us don't actively engage that muscle. So we're going to talk about engaging the TVA. So the TVA, to locate the TVA, you want to find your hip bones, find where those hip bones stick out with your fingers, and then you're going to slide your fingers over about an inch towards the midline of your body, and then slide those down. And that's approximately where the TVA would be located. The TVA wraps around our entire body. It's like a corset on a dress, and when our TVA is engaged, it acts like a corset. It causes us, it improves our stabilization. So a corset, when that's tightened, that really pulls things together. It limits movement. It's very similar to what the TVA does. All right, so to engage the TVA, it's kind of a tricky. It's not a simple thing to engage. So initially, when I was developing this video, I was going to call it 5 simple things you can do at work to make you a better runner. But then when I was thinking about engaging the TVA, I'm like, well, this isn't super simple, so I'm going to have to change the title. So this tip is going to be the most difficult of the 5 tips that I mentioned. But there are a number of cues that you can find online for how to engage the TVA. I'm going to give you one in this video, and then in the accompanying blog article, 5 things that you can do at work to engage, to make you 5 things that you can do at work to make you a better runner. I've included another technique that you can use. But the technique that I'm going to mention, I found in an article online from Wendy Powell with Mu2 System. And so basically what you're going to do is you're going to inhale normally, and then as you exhale, you're going to make a hissing sound, like a sound a snake would make. And as you do that, you should feel the TVA engage now. Also, what you want to be intentional about is just gently pulling in your belly button towards your spine. Now, it's not sucking in your gut, so when you do that, you're actually engaging other abdominal muscles. And when you do that, it's when you suck in your gut, it actually doesn't make you less stable. It doesn't make you more stable. It makes you less stable. So it's counterproductive. So we don't want to be sucking in our gut, but we just want to gently pull the belly button in just a little bit towards our spine. And then, as a bonus, if we can engage the muscles that stabilize the pelvis, the pelvic floor muscles, and pull that belly button just up slightly as well, then
we're really getting an extra bonus in engaging more of those core muscles that can make us more stable. So with again, with engaging the TVA, exhale, make that sound, and then relax the TVA, and then when you relax when you inhale, and then as you exhale again, make that hissing sound. And so that can be a cue to use to as far as engaging the TVA. Now, over time, you should be able to figure out how to engage that TVA without making that hissing sound. So you can just engage it automatically and hopefully engage that automatically throughout the day. Now, for now, with this tip, I am recommending just spending 10 seconds, multiple times throughout the day to focus on engaging the TVA. Okay, so that's tip number 2. Number 3 is leg swings. So with leg swings, we're going to need an immovable object. Hopefully your chair is immovable. You don't have one of those swivel chairs, but if you do have a swivel chair, then you can use maybe your desk or a table, but you need an immovable object. So you're going to stand at the side of that immovable object, and then you're just going to rest one hand on that immovable object just for support. The other hand can rest on your hip to stabilize your pelvis, because when we're doing these leg swings, you don't want to be swinging your pelvis around. You don't want to be tilting it up and down. You want to have a stable pelvis. You want to swing the leg that's closest to that immovable object, and you're going to just bend at the knee, swing that leg up, and then extend backwards, and performing 15 to 20 repetitions, and then just gradually increasing the range of motion while you're swinging, trying to extend as far as you can, but meanwhile, while you're doing that, making sure that you keep your pelvis stable and that you're not arching your back. So just gradually increasing that range of motion, but that will help to stretch out the hip flexors that have been shortened while you have been seated at your desk. Once you've done 15 to 20 repetitions for one leg, then turn around and do the same for the other leg. And I recommend incorporating those leg swings at least a couple times during the day. As a bonus, we can do side-to-side leg swings as well. So for side-to-side leg swings, we're going to face our immovable object. We can rest both hands on that immovable object and then just gently swing our legs side to side across the body, gradually increasing the range of motion, performing 15 to 20 repetitions. Now, doing these side-to-side leg swings will engage the gluteus medius and minimus. Those muscles are important because they help stabilize our hip when we have one leg on the ground, and they help minimize that hip from popping out when we have one leg on the ground. So it's important to engage, be actively engaging those muscles as well. All right, tip number 3 or 4 is a single leg balance. So much of the time when we're running, we have one foot on the ground, and really to be most efficient as a runner and to minimize the risk of injury as a runner, we really need to be as stable as possible when we have one foot on the ground. So we can practice that when we're not running by doing a single leg balance. So with single leg balance, you want to have your foot as flat on the ground as possible. You want to spread out your toes. You want to have your big toe down on the ground. You want that toe as straight as possible. So what you might want to do while you're doing these single leg balance is actually do this with your shoes off. That's where you'll get the most benefit, because you'll have the most proprioception, and I mentioned proprioception in a previous article. But that's where you'll be most effective in your single leg balance, is actually with your shoes off. So you're just going to stand on one leg. You're going to bring the other leg back so that basically you form a 90-degree angle between the upper and lower leg. You can rest your hands on your hips. Try to hold for 30 seconds with one leg, and then you can switch over and do the same on the other leg. And then do that for multiple bouts throughout the day. Try to accumulate a total of 5 to 10 minutes for each leg throughout the day. I strongly recommend that you don't try to do a block of 10 minutes at one time, but maybe do a couple minutes on each leg, and then do that multiple times throughout the day. Now we've reached tip number 5, and tip number 5 are glute squats. So I mentioned the importance of glutes, the glutes earlier in this muscle, especially the gluteus maximus, important for stability of hips and pelvis, and also it can be our strongest muscle, can provide us with a lot of power when we run to increase our speed. So with glute squats, we're going to need a chair, and I strongly recommend, you put your chair up either against your desk or a wall. I'm just going to put it up against this goal post so that it's stable, it's not moving around. And then what you'll need is either a yardstick, or you can use a wooden dowel. I bought this guy at Home Depot for about $5. You're going to need this yardstick or dowel because you want to keep your head, your back, tailbone all in alignment. So what you want to do is, with whatever object you use, yardstick or dowel, you want to keep, while you're doing these squats, you want to keep that object in contact with your head, upper back, and tailbone. You want to keep that all in proper alignment. So with your glute squats, you're going to put your knees up against the chair, and then you're just going to squat down. And so the chair really forces you to sit back as you hinge from the hips. So as you're sitting back, you are engaging more of the glutes. Now, if you don't have the chair with your knees pressed up against it, most of us, when we do our squats, we're leaning more forward when we do our squats, and so we're engaging the quadriceps a lot more. So most of us are quadricep dominant when we do squats. We want to focus more on strengthening those glutes, because they become weakened, as I mentioned, by sitting at our desk hour after hour. So by using a chair, forcing us to sit back more when we do these squats, we are engaging the glutes much more when we do this exercise. So I recommend performing 10 repetitions. Now, if your torso is more forward, if you're leaning more forward when you're doing your squats, that's okay for now. Over time, you'll get stronger in the glutes and other muscles, and you'll be able to be more upright when you do the squat. You want to try to squat down as far as you can. Ideally, you want to at least get down to where your upper legs, your thighs, are parallel with the ground. Don't worry about that for now, trying to get down that far. Over time, you'll be able to get further into your squats. You'll be more upright. It just takes consistency, repetition. With your glute squats, I recommend that you perform multiple sets throughout the day. Try to accumulate at least 2 to 3 sets of glute squats during the day. All right, so those are 5 tips, 5 recommendations, 5 things that you can do while you're at work to make you a better runner. And as I mentioned, the key is being intentional, being consistent with these. You don't have to incorporate each of these, every hour, but if you can do at least one or two of these each hour, just spend, 5 minutes. That can certainly be beneficial if you do those multiple times throughout the day and do that consistently from day to day. If you have any questions on these tips, please feel free to contact me at brian@denverrunningcoach.com. Brian spelled B-R-I-A-N. Or you can go to my website, denverrunningcoach.com, and on the menu bar is a tab for contact. Click on contact, and you can leave a question or comment in the comment box, and I'll respond to your questions as quickly as possible. All right, so that concludes this video. I wish you the best with your training, and till next time, I will see you later.